Hi, this is Rick Roller, and this is a Google Hangout to help you through the real estate exam. Yes, I know a lot of you are really nervous about taking the real estate exam. So what we're going to do is a series of these Google Hangouts every Tuesday to help you get through the real estate exam. I think you'll find them very, very helpful. There's going to be a schedule of events. Tonight, we're going to be talking about land description and what's important about land description. Now, let me be real clear with you. You can actually text in questions during part of this Hangout on any topic. We could talk about land description, which is a topic tonight. We can talk about appraisal or finance, contracts, anything you want to talk about. We can do that on this Hangout. So there'll be a section where we talk about land description. There'll be a Q&A when you can talk about any topic. And then there's going to be a little section on math. And then we're going to have some nice little stories about real estate and getting ready to get into business and why it's such an important and wonderful thing to do. Let me give you a little introduction to me. I've been selling real estate since 1977. I've been a broker. I've run big offices. I've had 100 agents. I've been a real estate educator. I started teaching real estate pre-licensing classes in 1980. I've literally helped thousands of people get through the real estate exam. And, you know, I guess I have to admit it. I've also been a devious exam writer. Yeah, that's right. I was the guy that wrote a lot of the questions that you're probably going to see. You know, I've written for all the major companies, ASI, ACT, NAI, you know, the list is endless. In fact, at one time, I was the writer for the entire test used in several different states across America. And so not only was I had this period of time in my life where I really got into this real estate exam testing. And I would go to another state and just take their exam just to kind of see how it felt and what was on it. I've taken some of these exams more than any living, breathing person I know of in some of these states. And, you know, I've been licensed in multiple states as well. But I didn't get licensed in every state I took the test in. But I don't know. It was a kind of a dark period of my life there when I really got into this exam thing. But then I changed, and I kind of changed sides. I mean, there was a period of time there in my exam writing career where, you know, a company's pass rate would get a little bit too high, and they'd come to me and they say, "Can you tighten this up just a little bit, toughen it up just a little bit?" Because, quite frankly, they love it when you have to retest. Any exam company does. Because think about it. There's only a limited pool of people that are going to take the real estate exam. You know, you can't just go out to your neighborhood mall and try to coerce people into taking the real estate pre-licensing exam. You've got to want to get into real estate to do that. So if they can get a percentage of the people that are taking the test to repeat, take it 2 times, 3 times, they're going to really increase their profit margin. And so, you know, they don't mind if you flunk. But I mind if you flunk because I switched sides and I became the guy that helped people get through the exam. And so I have helped thousands of people get through the real estate exam. And that's what I want to do here with these Hangouts. I want to give you the things that you need to know. You absolutely have to know. I'm going to cram them in your head. And these are going to be fast-paced because you took the class somewhere else. I mean, you're not sitting here to get credit hours in order to qualify to take the exam. You just want to know what's on the exam. And let me be real frank here. I teach exam, okay? Now, what that means is I might say something like every real estate appraisal has to have 3 approaches to value. And you know what they are, right? There's the cost approach, right? Where we look at what things would cost to replicate, and there's a formula for that. And then there's the market data approach, where we look at comparable homes out there and say, well, these are worth this, so this subject property has got to be worth that. And then there's the third one, which is the income approach. So if I tell you every appraisal has to have 3 approaches to value in order to be called an appraisal, that's because that's what the exam says. Now, what about the real world of real estate? Well, in the real world of real estate, an appraiser looks at all 3 approaches and evaluates whether or not that approach is relevant to his appraisal process. Quite frankly, in residential appraisal, often the income approach is really not given that much weight. And sometimes it's not even looked at all. Or you could have a really unusual house, like a 30,000 square foot single family residence. Now, if you go out on a market data approach, which is the primary approach that you would use to evaluate a piece of residential single family real estate, you're not going to find a lot of comps that have that kind of square footage. In fact, you may not find comps that have that kind of square footage. It's kind of a very unusual home. So they may have to lean more on the cost approach to determine what that property is worth. But in the hands of the gifted licensed appraiser, he may look at one of those three approaches to value and he may determine, well, that was really not relevant to my appraisal. So you'll get his report and that whole section will be blank, or there'll just be a comment saying not relevant to my appraisal and my professional opinion. But the test says every real estate appraisal has to have all three approaches to value. And so that's an example where the practical world might differ a little bit than the real estate exam. I'm going to give you some tips on how to get through in the practical world and how to actually make money in real estate, because it is a fantastic profession. It's one of those things where you can go out and really do something meaningful. You can bless lives and you can make money. And that's kind of my mantra. Bless lives, make money. Well, I want to bless your life tonight with this Google Hangout, where you're going to learn what you need to know in order to get through the real estate exam, that very stressful testing experience you have to get through in order to pass it with sufficient grade to get your license. And we're going to start focusing right now on land description. Okay, so let's talk about land description. And I'm going to use the pad here in order to kind of illustrate a few things. So, cameraman, you're going to have to move the camera a little bit. Okay. You know, when the colonists first came to the United States, when they started coming over in the 1600s and whatnot, a lot of them were from Europe. And what happens is that a lot of them were actually from Britain. And the first 13 states actually were, as you know, British colonies at one time. And so they brought with them Old English tradition law, and that's what they used to form most of our common law in the United States today. Now, in some states that had more Spanish or French origins, we have a different set of common law. But we're talking about land description tonight, and when the colonists first came here, they brought with them their methods they had used in England to describe who owned what. Now, when they first started coming over, in fact, some of the colonists, when they first got here, they were kind of communal livers. And so what was yours and what was mine wasn't really a big deal, because they were, quite frankly, religious fanatics who had fled Europe because they were being persecuted. And they couldn't live the way they wanted to live. So they came here, and originally they started out kind of like holding all things in common. That didn't last too long. And so then they started defining what was yours and what was mine. And when it came to real estate, where there weren't that many of them, they used a system that's really old called monuments and markings. Monuments and markings. And they'd say, well, okay, from this stack of rocks, you go in an easterly direction until you get to the stream. And then you turn there and you go over to the big oak tree. And then you turn there and go back to the boulder, then go back to the lane, and that belongs to Hosea or someone like that. And then what happens is it wasn't that big of a deal if someone was kind of next to it, because a lot of them had to clear the land. They had chopped the trees down. And, well, you knew what was yours because you cleared it. But then more and more people started to come. And sometimes those people didn't believe the same way you did. But we all got along. And so for the most part. And so what happens is what is yours and what is mine became more critical as more and more people came, and as it became more densely populated, and as other people came that, you just couldn't go to the minister and have things all worked out. And so what happens is the monuments and marking system morphed into something called meets and bounds. And here is what I call a wake-up item. Wake-up items are things you absolutely positively must know in order to pass the real estate exam. Because every meets and bounds description has a POB. POB stands for point of beginning. Every meets and bounds description has a point of beginning. Point of beginning is where it starts. And sometimes there's a big description in a meets and bounds description of you came from this known point over here and you went this way, this way, this way, that way, this way, until you got to the point of beginning. And so there's a couple of paragraphs or a whole paragraph there that does nothing more than get you to the point of beginning. Once you're at the point of beginning and you have this point, then the next thing that becomes important is directional novation. Directional novation is where you're standing on a point, and now you want to know, which way do I go? Do I go this way? Do I go that way? And there's two systems to determine and direct a person which way you have to go. Okay? One is the azimuth system, which isn't seen on the exams that much. The one that's on the exam you'll see more frequently, and what's used more frequently, is called the bearing system. The azimuth system uses a 360-degree circle. You start at 0, you go around the circle, and you're back at 360 degrees. The bearing system is different. The bearing system uses a circle, and then there's a north and a south in the circle, isn't it? Okay? And there's also an east and a west. And so what happens in the bearing system, you see, if you were to take the circle and throw it on the ground, and I'm standing on it, imagine that you're standing on the point of beginning. And now I need to know where to go. Well, quite frankly, people have been telling me where to go most of my life. So where I need to go would be directed from the bearing system. So we might say you start at north and you go 90 degrees east, because this circle is like this circle, and that there is a 0 degree and then 90 degrees. Then over here it'd be 180 degrees, right? 90, 90. Right or wrong? What do you think, guys? And then there'd be another 90 over here, and then over to 360, which would be 270 and then 360. Okay, that's how it works, of course. But what if it wasn't exactly that direction? What if you stood there and you had to go in this direction? Well, if you're standing here and you have to go off in that direction, then it would be like half the distance between here and there. So it'd be 45 degrees. Okay, what's the big deal? So to call this out, it would be north 45 degrees east. Okay? And if you went this way, it'd be north 45 degrees west. Now, whether you're calling out from the north or the south, it works pretty much the same. And what I mean by that is that if you were heading mainly in a northerly direction, you'd call it out because I'm heading that direction. But if you're heading in the southerly direction, you might say it's south 45 degrees east or south 45 degrees west. Now, you know, for most of us, that'd be just fine. But I don't know how many of you know engineers and surveyor type peoples. Engineer and survey, I mean, I work with them every day. Engineers and surveyors are some of the most interesting people you're ever going to meet because they are so specific. I mean, they go to bed at night dreaming about high math and this kind of thing, and a degree is too big. So I need to know exactly precisely what direction to go. So we got to take a degree and we got to divide it into something smaller. So we divide it into minutes. So it might be 45 degrees 2 minutes east, and then that's still too big. So maybe we need to divide that into seconds. North, 45 degrees, 2 minutes, 10 seconds east. Now we know exactly precisely, we get our laser, survey tool set up, and it goes exactly how it's supposed to go, okay? So every meets and bounds description has a point of beginning. Once you're standing on that point, you have to be told where to go by the bearing system. And what you may see, now, depending on the test in the state you're taking the test, most states have gone to computers to take their test. So you take it on a computer. There's still some states out there that are using paper test, and they're using like number 2 lead things to mark it, depending on which state you're taking it in. And that's okay, except that if you're taking it on a paper, they may have an illustration. Now, some of the software that some of the testing organizations have allow them to put illustrations into the multiple choice questions, but a lot of them don't. So that would be a good question to find out. Are you taking the ASI exam? Are you taking the NAI exam? Which exam are you taking? And do they have illustrations inside of the exam? Because if they don't have illustrations, you won't see this. But if they do have illustrations, you might see something like this. There'll be a circle, and then there'll be, this would be north, right? And they may not mark these, but they'll have maybe a slat and a slat here, and one here, and one there. And then if this were 90 degrees, and this is 45 degrees, what do you think an angle like this might be? Well, it's kind of halfway between here and 45. It's got to be something like 20. So what they'll do is say, according to the bearing description, this will be described as what? And since it's heading mainly north, it was pointing this way, it'd be south, it would start with north. Now, every bearing description always starts with the north or south. That's your second wake-up item. You will never see a bearing description that starts with east or west. They always start with north or south. So it would be north 20 degrees to the east, north 20 degrees to the west if it's heading this way, south 20 degrees to the west if you're going this way, or to the east if you're going in this quadrant here. Kind of get the hang of it. So if you saw this, there would be four answers, A, B, C, and D. And what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to choose which one. Now, there won't be anything like 18 or 19, 20, or 21. You'd have to have a compass to measure this to be exact. But they'll be pretty obvious, like 20, 45, 90, something like that. And so when you look at them, make sure that this starts with north. Probably what will happen is two of the answers will start, one with east, one with west. Eliminate those. Why? Because you know that it always has to have a north or south. And one will have south, one will have north. Well, you may not have, if you know it's up in this quadrant, you just look for one with north, you're fine. But they might have two norths, north 45 or north 20. You know it couldn't be 45. It's not far enough down here. It's got to be 20. Okay. Don't fret over these. Come on. Give it your best shot, answer it, and then move on to the next question. Forget about that one. For heaven's sakes, don't take little bits of you into the next question and leave little bits of you behind in the last question. By the time you get to the end of the exam, you need the whole you to focus on those last questions, not a little bit of you. If you've left little pieces of you behind emotionally on these questions, you're going to be really wiped out at the end of the exam. So I don't want that to happen. I want you to be just as good on the last question as you were on the first one, or maybe better. Okay. So emotionally, don't leave little bits of you behind as you go through the exam. Just do the best you can, pick it, and then forget about it and go on. Now, occasionally, you'll come to another question, and we'll answer a previous question. And most of the exams will let you scroll back and find that question and say, oh, whoa, yeah, I answered that right. Or you'll look at it and say, oh, man, I didn't read that carefully enough. I answered it wrong. If you can see your mistake, that is the only time you change a question answer. Don't change an answer if you can't see the mistake, please. Because studies have shown time and time again that you will lose more than you will gain. Usually your first impression is right. And that's the purpose of this Hangout, and that's the purpose of a lot of my test-taking tools, some of which I'm going to give you tonight for free, is to put these little triggers in your head so that when you see it, instantaneously, you'll intuitively know what the right answer is, you'll choose it, and then move on to the next question. Does that make sense to you? I hope it does, because it's the only way you're going to make it through the exam. Look, if you see the question from hell, and you're looking at it and you say, where did this come from? We didn't discuss this in class. Roller didn't give it to me on his one-liner. Review. Where did this come from? Well, don't freak out. Here is a foolproof method to get through that question. You take your right index finger. If it's a paper test, you put it on the question. If it's a computer test, you put it on the screen and you rub your finger up and down between A and D, A and D, A and D. Real fast. Pretty soon, one of those answers, A, B, C, or D, is going to get hot under your finger. And that's the right answer. 25% of the time. Well, some of you are good at math and you understand that joke, and some of you don't get it. Just talk to an engineer, he'll explain it to you. Okay, now, you understand that every meets and bounds description has to have a what? Point of beginning. In the bearing system, it always starts with north or south, and this tells you the directional novation of where you're going to go. Could be divided into minutes, could be divided into seconds, and guess what? You can do this, guys. You can do this. Guys, by the way, is generic for boys and girls. You can do this because guess how many degrees are in a minute? That's right, it's 60. And guess how many seconds are in a minute? I mean, how many minutes are in a degree? And guess how many seconds are in a minute? It's 60 again. See, you can do this. You can do this. Besides, I'm telling you the most important things. The other stuff is nice to know, but for the purposes of taking the test, you don't need to worry about that much. Okay, so here's the point of beginning, right up here. Let's move it down here to this quadrant down here so I can play with it a little bit more. This is our POV, and the directional elevation says go this direction for a little bit of time. And, in the old days it was a rod, 16.5 feet. Nowadays we call it out in, feet and whatnot. So it goes out here, and then it says stop. And it says change direction, go from here to here, and then go from there to here, and then do kind of a radius thing here. That's more fun to describe. And then you come back up here. Now, 2 more wake-up items here. These interim stops are called monuments. So you come here, change direction, change, radius, change. Second wake-up item. These are called what? Monuments. Second wake-up item. If this was done correctly, it will mathematically close. In other words, if we were to blow this up, and here's our point of beginning, and this is done correctly, and it comes back here, this will actually come back to the exact point of beginning. Now, occasionally, the world being populated by human beings, you have a situation where someone made a mistake, and they're off just a little bit in their math. And this does not mathematically close. It could be that this last shot from this last monument, it could be off 6 inches. It could be off 8 inches. It could be off an inch or two. Now, if it's you or I, we'd probably move in and live there perfectly happy. If it's an engineer and he finds out that his lot doesn't mathematically close, he's going to have to sell a house because he can't sleep at night. In the middle of the night, he wakes up, I can't sleep. Honey, what's wrong? His wife asks him, and he says, well, my lot doesn't mathematically close. I mean, honey, it doesn't, they can't hack it. So, if you're selling to engineers, that's a great opportunity for a quick resale. So keep that in mind. Okay, so the wake-up item is, it always comes back to the what? Point of beginning. And what are these called? Monuments. And what is this? The point of beginning. Okay. Now, what happened is this worked great. And all the eastern states are done this way. If you're selling real estate on the East Coast, Boston, New Jersey, New York, all those great places to sell real estate, this is what you're dealing with all the time. But in the 1700s, we ran into some problems. And the problem was that we had these vast tracts of land. And so this was getting really complicated, and it wasn't working real well. So the president at that time, President Andrew Jackson, fooled you there, it's actually Thomas Jefferson. They didn't get along that well anyway. Thomas Jefferson came along and he said, you know what, and Thomas Jefferson is a phenomenal man. Besides writing Declaration of Independence and working on the Constitution, writing that, and doing so many wonderful things that he did, he's the one that came up with what was called the U.S. survey system. And today it's called the Public Land Survey System. But what a thing of beauty, because now, if you're back east, you're not going to use the U.S. Public Land Survey System. Why? Well, because that was all figured out. It was all carved up. But if you went west, like Ohio was the first state to adopt it. So central United States and west from there, everything was pretty much done with this new system. And this new system was based on surveys. And we have something called principal meridians that were set in. So your next wake-up item is principal meridians. A principal meridian runs north and south. And we put them wherever we needed them. There was actually 37 of them throughout the United States. And so these principal meridians will put in as we needed them. As we went west, young man, go west, And, Tom Cruise and Nicole, when they were an item, did the movie, Far, Far and Away, and they land up in the land grab, and this gun went off, and they all stampeded in the Oklahoma land grab, and everyone's running to these little markers, and they would grab a flag. Well, that marker was put in with the U.S. Public Land Survey System, which is what we call it today. But what happens is we put in a principal meridian, and then every 6 miles, we put in another line. And so we have this grid system set up all across America. And that's how it works. But, any good grid system needs more lines than this. I mean, this is just strips. And so what happens is this is the principal meridian. It runs what? North and south. That's a wake-up item. But the lines that run east and west, west over here, east over here, these are called baselines. Okay? And so we would put those in where we needed them. And many communities in the West, in the central United States, have a road in them, like Boise does, and lots of communities do, called Baseline Road. Well, Baseline Road is set up on, guess what? That's right. See, the baseline. You can handle this. And so these were put in as 6 mile increments too, thus forming a little square. And this is the basis of the Public Land Survey System. And this little square here, which is 6 miles, 6 miles, 6 miles, 6 miles, is called a township. Okay? So we've made the system. Now, we will call these baselines and meridians different names depending on where it is. And I live in Utah, and so we call it the Salt Lake baseline and the Salt Lake principal meridian. Okay? And that square is right in the middle of downtown Salt Lake. So I know where that is. This little intersection here. And so what happens is they are numbered then from the baselines and the meridians. So these strips that run this way, east and west, are called tiers. Or sometimes are called tier rows or tiers. And that's not a wake-up item. But they're all numbered from the baseline. So this is tier 1 north, tier 2 north, tier 3 north, tier 1 south, tier 2 south, okay? Now, that doesn't identify it. It identifies it north and the strips north and south, but doesn't identify it east and west. So what happens is each one of these strips going this way, east or west from the principal meridian, are called ranges. Home on the range, right? And so this if we're talking about Salt Lake, would be range 1 west, range 1 east, range 2 west, range 2 east. So I can identify this township right here. I can identify that as tier 2 north, range 2 east. And that identifies that 6 mile by 6 mile or 36 square miles township. Now, if you're to run a marathon, start here and run all the way around this township, that'd be 24 miles because it's 6, 12, 18, 24. So some tests have a question that says, how many miles square is a township? Miles square is different than square miles. Miles square is 24. Marathon, 6, 12, 18, 24. How many square miles is 36? So wake up when you take the test. Put your effort into it and be cognizant of each question. In fact, what I would suggest you do, read each question twice before you look at the answers. Read each question twice before you look at the answers. Why? Because it will get in your mind what you're looking for. If you glance over it and you misread it because you're stressed and in a hurry or whatever, and then you jump into a question, I will guarantee you that a devious exam writer like me has put answer item A or B as a distractor that sounds so good. Oh, there it is, A. And you grab it, and then you come back later, reread it, and say, oh man, I just misread that. That didn't say that at all. It didn't say square miles, it says miles square. Please, don't lose one. See, most people, when they take the exam and they flunk, it's only by 1 or 2 points. In our state, it's a 70%, good solid C- to pass, okay? But they'll get a 68, or they'll get a 69. And then I'll have to go through the embarrassment of going home and telling your friends and family, well, I flunked. What if you've already made arrangements to go to work for a broker, and he knew you were taking the test on Saturday, and you show up Monday or Monday afternoon, you call him and say, I flunked the test, got to take it again. He'll be nice, or she'll be nice. She'll say, oh, don't worry about it. A lot of people do that. You just right back in there and pass it. But you don't want that kind of embarrassment. You don't want that kind of stress. You want to pass the first time. I'm all about getting you through the exam the first time. I've worked with a lot of people that have struggled with the exam. And I didn't used to do that, back when I was the dubious exam writer guy. But I got a call from a lady one time. This is a lady I knew. I used to be a manager for a company here in Salt Lake that was very innovative and controlled all the high end. It's called Gump and Ayers. It was a phenomenal company. Victor Ayers and Marjorie Gump started, and they were very forward thinking. You got to understand, back in 1977 when I got in the real estate business, we only had 500,000 realtors in the whole country. Now there's a little over 1 million, and it's over twice. Of course, we have more people too. But back in those days, we had women in the business, but not as many. In the 70s, the heirs were very progressive. Said, women will do better at this business than men. And so they hired a lot of women. We had a group of women at that company that ruled. They were so good. And they had all the high end tied up, and they were wonderful. Well, these ladies left the company, started their own company. Well, that just happens in real estate. So what happened was, when they started their own company, they rotated broker assignments. And so this one lady, who was a famous realtor, her name was on, the sold book. Back in those days, we had a sold book. We didn't have the internet. So you flip to the sold, there'd be whole pages devoted to her, and they're all in this high-end stuff, the premium deluxe, fabulous properties in town. And her name was all over them as either the selling or the listing agent. Well, it was her turn to be the broker. And so she went and took the test, and she flunked. She took it again and flunked. She took it a third time and flunked. She went to our division of real estate. And she went in there and she talked to our director of the real estate division. She says, there is a conspiracy here to keep me from passing my broker's test. I am who I am. You know who I am. I'm famous, and I can't get through the test. And he said, you're right. We hand graded your last test, and you flunked. I don't know what to do. So what am I going to do? He says, well, call Rick Roller. He'll get you through the test. So she called me and said, Roller, the division said you'd tutor me. And I said, I don't do private tutoring. She said, well, I'll pay you a lot of money. I said, well, would Tuesday or Wednesday work out for you? And so we started tutoring. And it didn't take me too long to figure out what her problem was. She was misreading the questions. She only read half of it and go right to the answer. You cannot do that. Well, I worked with her for about 3-4 hours, and next time she went in and passed. And she took her broker assignment, everything happened. And that was one of the things that was instrumental in getting me to change and start working with people. But I've worked with many, many people like that. And I just you can do this. You can pass the test, and you can make it in this business as well. And well, back to what we're talking about in land description. So here's what happens is we have a township now, and that's cool. But let's take the township, and let's take this township right here, and let's blow it up a little bit more, okay? Because there's more wake-up items to follow. All right. Here's that same township. We got 6 miles, 6 miles, 6 miles, 6 miles, right? 36 miles square. Guess what? A township is further divided into something we call sections. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and this is our township. Just got remodeled a little bit. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Whoops, 6. All right. So here we go. This is our new township. Because there's 36 of these little sections in it. Okay. Now, this is a wake-up item we're working up to here. Okay. Now, when Tom and Nicole were in the land grab, was it go east, young man? Or was it go west, young man? It would go west. So where do you think they started from? Did they start from the east and go west? Or did they start from the west and go east? Because we got to number these puppies, okay? Well, guys, it was go west, young man. So they started with 1 right here. All right, so here's a guy hired to go out with a mule and his chain and a compass and kind of lay out these stakes
for the Oklahoma land grab, okay? It's kind of a hot, thankless job, but, hey, it was a government work, and he took it because that's all he could get. So here he goes. Not that government work is bad. I mean, for the last couple of years, I've been an inside realtor for a quasi-public organization doing commercial real estate, a very narrow niche in commercial real estate. And it's kind of fun, but that's another story. So anyway, we started here with 1, and then he got the mule to go, and he pulled out this thing. This is if it's 6 miles across here, and there's 6 of these, how long do you think this is? Yeah, it's a mile. So he went a mile, he put a stake in, and then he goes 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay? Now, being the really efficient government employee that he is, where do you think he's going to put 7? Is he going to go back 6 miles? Oh, heavens no. He's going to go 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. You see where I'm going here? 17, 18. So what happens is you go serpentine, which is another movie of the in-laws actually, and they were being shot at, and he starts yelling at his partner, serpentine, serpentine. You're hard to hit that way, But so remember, far, far and away, and the in-laws. Okay, so you got to go west, young man, and then you go serpentine until you get all the way down to the bottom, number 36. Now, what's the wake-up item? Occasionally you'll see a test question that says, what is the section immediately south of section 16? Now you're given all of the scratch paper you want. No limit on that. So no big deal. So what happens is just draw it out, remembering to start here. Now, if you're Hebrew or you read Hebrew, this is where you start anyway. But if you're, when looks this way, go this way, but you start here, okay? And so you go, and then you go serpentine, and so I'd have to continue because I want to know what's south of here. So it'd be 19, 20, 21, and that's as far as I need to go. I don't need to finish it out. You compulsive people, you only need to go this far to answer the test question. It'd be section 21 is immediately south of what? Section 16. You can do this. You can do this. I just gave you the keys on doing this. You can do this. I know you can. Come on. 70% C minus, but I want you to do it the first time out. I don't want you to put in your mind, I'm just going to try the exam, and if I do okay, I'm okay, and if I don't do okay, I'll be okay. No, I don't want that. I want you to pass the first time. Okay? Now, another interesting item is that the government, since we have this vast tracts of land and they own it all anyway, they decided that they're going to take every 16th section and they're going to give it to the state, and the state can do whatever they want with it to raise money to do the agricultural colleges and public schools. So what happened was these were called, 16 was called school section. But, back in Ohio and some of those areas, they started to become even, more populated, and that worked okay there. But you get, a little bit further west, particularly you come to the state of Utah, for heaven's sakes, and we have vast tracts of federal land here still. In fact, most of the state of Utah is owned by the federal government. And so, one section out of 36 wasn't enough. And so in some of the western states, like Utah in particular, there's actually 4 sections that were set aside to be school sections. So, it just gave more land to the state so they can raise money on, quite frankly, was less valuable land in order to come up with enough money to get the school systems going. So that varied a little bit, and kind of a little bit of trivia there. But there is, in the tests, they don't get in that kind of a detail. Mostly it's just that there was a school section, and you might have to know that. Okay, and so you know how to number. This is all part of the U.S. Rectangular Survey System. What happens is a lot of times they'll use this as the point of start because it's a section corner that's easily found because of survey. And then they'll jog this way, that way, this way, that way, this way, and then they'll get to the POB, point of beginning, and then what will happen is you'll have a meets and bounds description that will take off from there, but they had to be a reference point to start from. And so sometimes the systems kind of overlap. Now, there is one more, you want to turn the camera, Michael? One more type of description, and that's also used. And that's lot and block. And you go into developed areas, and what happens is a developer came in about 50 or 60 acres, And you have to break things down. I mean, come on. How many acres do you think there are in each one of these sections? Well, if it's a mile by a mile by a mile, you do the math on that, multiply a mile by a mile, you get square footage. You know that an acre is 43,560. Now, let me give you a way to remember that. Repeat after me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Invert the first two. No, that doesn't work. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Add the first two up. Maybe I better do some work so I get it straight for you. Okay. What we're going for is 43,560. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, I'm glad this is live. All right. So 3, 4, 5, 6. Invert the first two. 3, 4, 5, 6. Invert the first two. Give me some slack, okay? You know, every time I take the exam, I never get 100%. Well, sometimes I do, you know, but most of the time I get like, 98 or something because I'm into speed testing. If I go and do the whole test and it takes me only like, 30 minutes, that's too long, so, but invert the first two. 3, 4, 5, 6, 0. 3, 4, 5, 6, 0. Invert the first two. Now, some people like to remember this as 4 and 3 is 7, 5 and 6 are 11, 7, 11. Okay, but if you're a big Gulp fan or something, but I like 3, 4, 5, 6, invert the first two. Okay, all right, cool. That's how many square feet are in 1 acre. Okay. 1 acre is 43,560. So if you were doing the math, 5,280 feet by 5,280 feet, that's the number of feet in a mile. You'll come up with this huge number, divide it by this, and you'll come up with the magic number of 640 acres in one section. Now, how many people do you know that live on a 640-acre lot? Well, maybe you're up in Montana, Wyoming, or somewhere they have a huge ranch or farm in Idaho or something like that, or Texas. My goodness, that's not uncommon. But, most of us do not have a 640-acre lot, okay? And so you have to divide this down a little more. So what happens is a developer comes in and he buys a piece of the section. Maybe buys several sections. Maybe buys half the section or 40 acres or something. And then he takes that and he has engineers and land planners come in and you go through a lot of planning and zoning thing with the cities and counties. And you come up with a plat map that everyone likes and approves of, and it's all surveyed and measured and figured out perfectly. And then that plat map is recorded. And let's call it, Sunnyside Acres. So Sunnyside Acres is divided into like quarter acre or half acre lots or something, or even smaller or bigger, okay? And from that, we come up with the lot and block numbering system. And so it could be that this big subdivision has this little lot here, and this is called Lot 3, Block 4 of whatever subdivision it is, Sunnyside Acres or whatever you want to call it. And there can only be one subdivision with that name in the entire county, where this is recorded. So you could have Sunnyside Acres filing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 if you had different plot maps. But that's called the lot and block method, and there's not a lot you can screw up on that. Okay, so that's our whirlwind discussion. You've got to know how many square feet are in an acre. You got to know how many feet are in a mile. You got to memorize them, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then you could figure this out if you had to. But knowing that a whole section of 640 acres is helpful too. Okay, so that concludes our concentrated work on land description. So we're going to take this off and zip away, and that's it. So what we're going to move into now are some, I think, do we have, gentlemen, do we have some text questions that have come in? I think we have a few. Okay, okay, let me take this one. Okay, this is from Bart. Now, remember, if you want to text in a question, you can facilitate that through the Google Hangout, or if you just want to, that's the best way to do it, and through the chat mode there. And so
Bart's question, this is not about land description. Okay, Bart's question is, what are discount points? I'm confused. Why do lenders use them? Okay, this is a finance question. And discount points are confusing to a lot of folks. They're even confusing to some bankers. I'm just joking, bankers get it. But a discount point is 1%. But they don't call it that. They call it points. Sometimes they further divide it into basis points. You know, they have this mysterious language they use. A discount point really is nothing more than prepaid interest. A discount point allows a lender to get a higher yield out of a loan and yet charge what appears to be a lower interest rate. For example, you have a $100,000 loan. He could charge you 6%, or she, and you would, figure that was fair, and you signed it, and so you're going to pay $6,000 in interest on a $100,000 loan because each point of a loan, or if it's 6%, is 6 times the principal. That's the interest rate times the principal gives you the amount of interest due. Okay, no big deal. Or they could charge you, let's say, 5%. Oh, that's a much better loan than 6. I'm only going to pay $5,000 in interest, but they charge you 3 discount points. See, 3 discount points on $1,000 would be $3,000, and points are paid up front. So he could charge you a lower interest rate, make 5% on the interest on that, or $5,000 on the loan, but they got 3% in discount points up front as part of your closing costs. So you actually paid $8,000 in interest on a 5% loan because they charged you points up front. So discount points are a way for a lender to increase their yield. That's what the test says. Okay. You can buy down interest rates by paying interest up front. Some lenders are extremely sophisticated. They know the average lifespan of a loan. If we're in a rapidly declining interest rate market, the average lifespan of a loan could be as little as 18 months. So they figure if you're going to put them online at an interest rate and then you're going to refinance that later and then get rid of them and get a new lender, then they went to all that trouble and work. So they're going to charge you something up front, usually to kind of lock in their yield that they're trying to get. Or they might give you a lower interest rate and charge you discount points. 1 point is equal to 1% of the loan amount. So what's the trick on the test? Devious exam writers will write a test question and they'll say, well, someone's buying a house, they're paying $200,000 or getting an 80% loan to value loan. You're paying 1 discount point. How much in dollars will you pay in discount points? Okay, discount points are not charged on the purchase price. They're charged on the loan amount. The loan amount. Okay, they're charged on the loan amount. So where's the trick in that question? Well, he got an 80% loan to value ratio loan. In other words, he put 20% down. He didn't borrow $200,000. That's what he paid for the house. He only got a loan of $160,000, right? 80% of the $200,000 purchase price. So the discount point would be charged on the loan amount. So devious exam writer will put that $2,000 figure at answer A or B because, hey, you're in a hurry to get rid of this exam. I got to get out of here. I can't take the stress. Oh, that's easy. You picked A or B and you're dead because you just missed it. And it was a simple one. Think it through. They're charged on the loan amount, so there'll be another. We'll hide it down there in D or C or something, and I'll say $1,600, but you won't pick that one because it'll sucker you into the first one because you didn't read the question carefully enough. The trick on that one, Bart, is to understand that discount points are charged on the loan amount. And 1 point is equal to 1%, and that's that. Okay, do we have another one? Okay, thank you. Oh, this person's shy. They didn't give me their name. Just give me a phone number. Okay, wherever you are, I'm not gonna read your phone number. I'll call you later. Okay, why is the course material so heavy on mortgage and appraisal? I'm not licensing as a lender or an appraiser. Well, you're right. A lot of the course material in the real estate schools really gets into appraisal, heavy duty, and it gets into mortgage loans, heavy duty. And so you're going, well, why am I learning all this stuff? I don't want to be a loan officer. I don't want to license as an appraiser or a loan officer. I want to be a realtor. Okay, I want to be a real estate agent. Well, The practical answer is that you're going to be dealing a lot with lenders, and it's very helpful to you to have a really firm understanding of mortgage law and mortgages, because a lot of times your buyers and even your sellers there's things that are important for them to know as well. And having a great amount of knowledge in that area is very helpful when you're out in the field. I mean, you're entering into a profession that has a lot of different areas, and it's real important that you become a generalist expert, particularly if you're selling residential real estate. If you're getting into a niche field like I'm currently in, and I've been in for about 2 years now, where I'm dealing with railroad right-of-ways. I mean, talk about a niche market. I mean, it's a very focused niche in commercial real estate. But you know, I mean, it's interesting, and so I deal with people that do crossings underneath railroads and whatnot. So what happens is you need to really dig into that and understand that niche. But in general, real estate, if you're selling real estate, you got to have, you know, a lot of knowledge, and same with appraisal. Appraisals can kill your deal. So the more familiar you are with appraisals, you know, the more effective you might be in saving a deal or making a deal work or explaining something to someone so they understand. I mean, you know, we'll have a class on appraisals, but you know, appraisals are art pieces. You know, they're artwork. They're not scientific. You know, a lot of consumers out there think because it has numbers in it and it's all pretty and a nice report, it's some sort of scientific process. Well, the process is well defined, and it's not an easy process, but the result is artwork. It's one person's opinion of what that property is worth, and sometimes they're high and sometimes they're low. Sometimes market, and sometimes they're right on the money. But you need to have an understanding of those. And that's the practical answer. The real answer, from a test perspective, they have so many cool terms in it that there's over 400 words in real estate that you've got to know, and words that you don't use in everyday life. I mean, puratere v. I mean, give me a break. I mean, there's a lot of words out there and concepts that you'll never use. The habendum clause, you'll never use it. I mean, go to a bar, try to pick up a chick using the habendum clause line. I mean, it's not going to work, guys. I mean, you know, come on, it's as funny as I get. You know, I don't hear riotous laughter even from my own crowd here. All right, well, so here's the deal. Mortgage law and appraisals have a lot of those words, and so they're going to write test questions on them because they just can't help themselves. So, all right, Bart, that's it. So I don't know what to tell you other than that. Here's another one. Derek writes in and he says, give me an example of a general lien and how is one established? Okay. You know, this is more of an encumbrance question, and liens can fall into two main categories: general liens and specific liens. General liens are liens that cover all real and personal property of the person that has a lien charged against them. Normally, they could be put in a number of ways. It could be statutory, where like income tax. You know, I mean, the IRS income tax is a general lien. If you don't pay your taxes and you're taken to court and they decide that you owe $100,000 in taxes, they could take real estate, they could take personal property, they could take your coin collection, your cars, your boat, whatever, I mean, your airplane. They could take all that stuff away because the general lien covers everything that individual owns. A specific lien only covers specific property. And specific liens are a lot of times put into play by statute, like the IRS statute creates a general lien. But the best example of specific liens would be things like real estate property taxes. See, property taxes are different than income taxes. Property taxes only lien a specific property. So if you own 20 homes, 20 properties, and one you didn't pay the taxes on, the government could take that one, you know, state government in this case, but not the other 19 because they're specific. Okay, another way that general liens can be established is by operation of law, court. If you go to court, someone sues you and they decide, you know, the judge decides or the tribunal decides that you were wrong and they issue a general lien against you. A judgment lien, a general lien, it covers all real and personal property. Okay? Or going back to the statute, another example of a specific lien would be like a mechanic's lien. Mechanics lien would only lien to property that was improved, and that could be enforced through a court of law or through other processes depending on the state that you're living and working in. So, quick definition of general and specific liens. Okay, we've got some more here. Susan. Susan writes in, this is, okay, I understand you started selling in 1977. That's 38 years ago. Yeah, okay. Trying to figure out my age. Do you ever get tired of real estate? Well, great question. Real estate has this phenomenal aspect to it that there are like a bazillion niches and directions you can go. Most people start out selling residential real estate and then they decide, hey, you know, this is not my gig. I don't like it that much. I don't like working evenings, weekends, and when everybody else is off work. Maybe I ought to go do commercial. And so they got commercial that you're working with a lot of business people, and then occasionally you do some evening or weekend stuff, but usually 6 o'clock, everyone goes home. And, you know, they're not going to call you about leasing a property usually on a holiday weekend. They just don't. I mean, but they're busy on the residential side, not so much busy on the commercial side. So you might get into the business and find, well, commercial is my niche, or you might get into property management, which is another whole niche, which is fun and exciting and cool and very profitable. Or, you know, which, you know, has a sales element to it, but it's not hardcore sales like in selling houses or selling commercial real estate or commercial management. Property management goes both ways, or you might get your license and do association management, or you might get into other niches out there. There are landmen that do mineral rights. There are people that sell water rights. There are people that work like I do and right-of-way work right now. And so you have all these different fascinating things. So I guess I could answer your question, Susan, by saying if you get bored or you feel like you like change and it's redundant, just find another niche and go for it. I mean, the field is so broad in real estate. It's so exciting, and it is the best job that you could have to pay you big money. Or it could be the worst job you ever have, paying nothing, because a lot of it is, of course, commission-based. But if you learn the right things, if you start out from the beginning and you develop the right habits and someone teaches you the right things to do, it's a fantastic thing. I'll share a story with you a little later. Let me get some more of these out of the way. Okay. Bob, can you clarify the difference between cap rate and gross rent multiplier? Kind of an appraisal question. Cap rate and gross rent multiplier are kind of opposites. Cap rate involves a division process, and gross rate multiplier involves a multiplication process. So one's division, one is multiplication. On a cap rate, as an investor now, when I'm going out and buying properties, I want a high cap rate, also sometimes called capitalization rate, also sometimes called rate of return. I want a high rate of return, okay? And so, like, when I'm looking to buy a property, a 7% cap rate is better than a 5, or an 8% is better than a 7. So when I'm evaluating properties, I'm looking for a high cap rate. But you get there by dividing the net op, okay, and you manipulate that, and it's a mathematical process that involves division. I'll explain that better when we get into the appraisal class, because you just want to know the difference. Gross rent multiplier is the opposite, okay? When I'm buying a property as an investment, I want a low gross rate or gross rent multiplier, because the definition of gross rent multiplier is you take the gross rents, what that property rents for. Let's say it's $1,000 a month, little tiny, single family house or something. And so that's $12,000 a year. And so it could be, if you're looking at an annual gross rate multiplier, if you have to pay a high multiplier, you're going to pay more for that property. In other words, okay, $12,000 a year in rents. By the gross rent multiplier of 4 would be you'd pay $48,000 for that house. Okay, if it had a higher gross rent multiplier, it would cost you more. If it was a 10 times rent or 10 gross rent multiplier, you'd have to pay $120,000 for the house. So as an investor, you want low gross rent multipliers and you want high cap rates. Now we'll get into more specifics on the tricks involved in particularly devious exam writers in another Google meetup later when we do appraisal. Okay. Julie, no, this is what we're talking about tonight. What is the difference between a monument and a point of beginning? Okay, well, getting back to my chart, I already ripped it off, threw it on the floor, but a point of beginning, there's only one of them in the whole meets and bounds description. Every time you change direction in the meets and bounds description, there could be another monument. So you could have, I drew some rectangles, but I showed some arcs. And I mean, you could have 6 monuments, but only one point of beginning. They are still a point. It's some place where you're starting, and then you take off from there, and you go around on that. Okay. You have any more? Oh, here's another one. Okay. Katie. Okay. This is a personal question. It says, I'm young and look younger. Will buyers and sellers take me seriously? That's a fair question. I know that, Katie, you're probably very concerned about that. And, I mean, hey, being young looking when you get to my age is a great thing. Okay. But when you're starting out in real estate and you're trying to help people buy and sell properties and whatnot, maybe it's you're worried about will people take you seriously or not. Okay. Well, I wasn't always this age, and when I started real estate in '77, I was in my 20s, and I had a similar concern. And this is what I found. I found that people will take you seriously if you take yourself seriously. I found that, Katie, what you need to do is immerse yourself in the business and learn everything you can as fast as you can. And then, so you become the expert. Your knowledge will trump your age. Okay. And most importantly, you need to bless lives. It gets back to that bless lives, make money mantra. If the people know that you truly care about them and they have the knowledge to back it up, I mean, after all, Katie, I mean, the state said you're okay. They licensed you, right, at that point, at that time. So you can always fall back on, well, I'm licensed, But if they know you really care, if they know that they matter to you, then all of a sudden they don't care about your age. They care about your commitment to them and the process that they're entering into. You are state licensed, and that'll get you through. You're going to have to develop something I call proof of performance. And that's a topic for a whole another situation. But I've got a series of products called the Jumpstart program, and I teach you meticulously how exactly to do proof of performance so that people understand that you're not just another agent, you're actually an agent that's doing something and making it happen for other people. You're blessing lives and making money. But let me finish this comment by saying that I found when I started also is that a number of people, particularly that are older and very successful, liked working with young people because they liked giving them a hand up. Someone gave them a hand up when they were young and starting their businesses or starting out in the business world or in the financial world, and they always remembered that. And so if they have an opportunity to give you a hand up and get you going, they like that. And so you'll find that your youth, your enthusiasm, your energy level, your commitment will all play in your favor. And I think you'll do just fine. Okay, it's time to get some stuff away. And let me give you an example of what we're giving away and how this works, okay? You can go online tonight and you can download what I call the Rick Roller one-liner review. And I developed this a number of years ago to help individuals cement into their heads concepts. This is a concept review that will be very instrumental in helping you get through the exam. And let me give you an example. This is one of the one-liners in the one-liner review, okay? Due to the nature of assets, prefer long-term estate loans? Do the nature of assets prefer long-term estate loans? And the answer is insurance companies. So the one-liner review works like this. You kind of commit that to memory. Okay, long-term loans, long-term assets, long-term estates. Who likes that kind of investment? Who buys long-term real estate loans? Insurance companies, because of the nature of their assets. They get people to sign up for life insurance and pay these premiums over 10 years or 20 years if it's a term policy, or even longer. So this income stream comes in. So they're looking for a long-term, stable and type of financial document that they can invest in. So due to the nature of the assets, the insurance company have assets that are stretching for long-term. They prefer long-term estate loans. Insurance companies. That's how a one-liner works. Let me give another example. The capitalization rate used in the valuation of income property would not take into consideration federal income tax. The capitalization rate used in valuation of income property does not take into consideration federal income tax. Federal income tax, or the tax ramifications of owning real estate, are one of the best reasons to buy it. But when I say I got a cap rate of 7 or 8%, like I was talking about earlier, that doesn't take into consideration I also sheltered substantial portion of my income by buying this property and being an active participant in its management and whatnot. So when you're comparing investing in real estate to investing in something else like gold, bullion, or silver, or fine wine, or stamps, or art, or any other type of investment, those don't throw off any tax benefits. So to be fair, you probably ought to look at whether I should buy this real estate as opposed to buying this other item over here that will also give me a rate of return. Is buying this real estate will give me these other benefits. And so those other benefits add in to make this shine better than those. So cap rate does not take into consideration in valuation of income property federal income tax. It's one of the foibles of it. And so really smart individuals came up with other investment measures like financial management rate of return and things like that, or internal rate of return, that do take that into consideration. And now you're comparing apples to apples across the board on different types of investments. We'll talk about that in another class more. Another one-liner. Must be specifically stated in an option agreement, length or time period of an option. The one defining thing of an option is it must have a definite termination date. And so must be specifically stated in the option agreement, the length or time period of the option. Okay, 4 examples of the one-liner. The one-liner is a concept review. And for those of you that are viewing in from other states, there's about 43 or 47 of them on national topics. For those of you that are taking the Utah test, there's another 40 or so Utah topics that are specific to the state of Utah. They're separated out so you know which is which. So if you're taking that national exam, which is half of your ability to pass to get your license, these 43 or 47 of those national concepts are going to be the things you absolutely have to know. And so go online. You go online to rickroller.com/one-liner. rickroller.com/one-liner, and put in your information. And we will email you the one-liner exam review. That's my gift to you. You're welcome to have that. Also, when you give us the email, I will also put you on a automatic video feed, which will send you, it's about every other day, you'll get what I call a test tip. And the test tips are really short little videos. They're like 2 or 3 minutes. They're very short. And sometimes they're even shorter than that. But what it is I explain on video each one of the one-liners, like I've just done. And so you got an example of that, only I just did 4. On the tips, when they come out, there'll be short little videos that will explain one by one. And those will come out. I think they're set to go out every other day. If you're in a hurry, like you're taking the exam, like 2 weeks or next week or next Saturday or something, and you want to, I'll give you the exam, the written ones, the PDF. You can have those tonight if you want. But if you'd like to have the video all up front, well, you got to buy me lunch. And what that means is I can sell you it's about an hour and 28 or 32 minutes or something video that explains all the different ones of the one-liners, and that's for the phenomenal price of $9.97. You buy me lunch, and I'll send you the video, or I'll give you the video free. It just comes in over time. That's up to you what you want to do. So that's free for the asking, the one-liner PDF download. You can have that with my blessing, and I hope it's helpful to you. I hope what we've talked about tonight's been helpful and exciting to you. I want to finish out tonight by going back to Katie's concern about, if you're young, can you make it into business? And let me tell you a little quick story. When I got into business, I didn't have a bridge to go back over. I was young. I worked real hard, and I had some commissions coming to me from a whole different industry. And at the last minute, unfortunately, those commissions were diminished significantly. I wasn't paid what was originally agreed that I was going to be paid. Well, sometimes that happens in business, and be real careful to read all the fine print. So what happens is, I was planning on that to give me a cushion to get into real estate. Long story short, I didn't have much of a cushion at all. So when I got into business, I had to make it happen. So I showed up a lot. I learned everything I could. I took a lot of classes as I could afford them to learn more, most specifically the GRI series, which is a wonderful series. And I invested in other education, which helped me with sales as well. But back in 1977, the sales training really wasn't all that good, as a matter of fact. But I showed up for work every single day. I showed up Saturdays. I worked late in the evenings, and sometimes calls would come in, and I would get those calls. And sometimes people would come in on Saturday. They'd see the open sign to come in the office. And I'd get those leads because I had to make it work. And if you're in a position where this is your one shot, which to tell you the truth is most of us. I don't care if you even have money, like I have hundreds of thousands of dollars or whatever. If you get in the real estate business and you fail, are you going to try it again next year in 2016? You fail. Okay, is your spouse going to let you try it again next year in 2000? Oh, wait a minute. You already tried that once. It didn't work. We starved, or got into our savings or whatever. We got to go to a real job. Okay. If you have to make this work, then please get some help to make it work. And let me go on with my story. Okay. So, I had a guy call in, and he asked me about a specific property, and I answered him, and then I kept his name and whatnot. I followed up. And he ended up buying something. So I learned that tenacity and follow-up is important. Now, look, let's be real here. If you picked any individual off the street and they have no interest in buying a house, what are the chances of you talking to that individual and convincing them that right now is the time to go out and buy a house, and turning their thinking around and getting them qualified for a loan and running them out and selling them a $375,000 house? There are two chances of making that happen, slim and none. So there's a great deal of difference between being tenacious and following up on someone who is interested and has expressed a valid interest and has a desire to buy something, and being tenacious, than being a bother to someone who has absolutely no interest in buying or selling right now. In our industry, we need to work with people who have a genuine interest of either buying or selling or leasing. But if you're bothering everybody else, they don't want to talk to you, and you probably shouldn't be talking to them anyway. So don't confuse being tenacious and doing really good follow-up with being obnoxious, particularly if they have a real true interest. Well, let me illustrate a little further. My first week into business, my sales manager, his name was Oli, wonderful guy, got me in that first week, and he pulled me aside and says, well, I guess I'm going to be your sales manager. I'd like to get to know you a little better. Why don't we go for a ride? So I hopped in his car because, well, he had air conditioning and I didn't. I just had a Volkswagen Bug, not the best car for real estate. It didn't have air either. So we hopped in his car and we're driving around, and he's showing me the town. We're driving through different subdivisions and things, and we were driving in the subdivision. There was a duplex, and there were big weeds in front of it, the kind that grow up when no one's taking care of anything. And it was vacant. It was obvious it was vacant. It had stickers on the windows. And I said, hey, Oli, when I moved here, I was looking for a place to rent because I didn't own a home when I got into business. And as a kid, I didn't. And I was looking for a place to rent, and I noticed that duplex was vacant. That was about 3 months ago. And when I moved here, and my goodness, it was vacant then, and it's still vacant now. Maybe I ought to follow up on that. Not only was a great salesman, he used the takeaway close. He said, well, kid, I'll tell you what, either you follow up on it or I will. He had a business he needed. So, I'll follow up. So when we got back to the office, I got in my little Volkswagen Bug and I drove over to the county assessor's office and ended up going in there and asking them who owned that property. That was the extent of the real estate training back in those days. It was pretty miserable. So I went in there, and they had a card, and it was kind of like 8.5 by 11, but it was cardstock, and it had something on it that had been cut off, so it was this size, and it had printing over here, some state stuff, and they were being wise servants. They were repurposing that paper, and so they took that and they wrote on there the gentleman that owned the property and what his address was. And I went back to the office and pulled out the phone book. Back in those days, we had phone books. Some of you might not know what that is, but I pulled up the phone book and I looked up this gentleman's name. His name was John Desbovic. And, using my finely honed Ricky real estate skills, I wrote down his number on the same piece of paper. And I started calling. I called and there was no answer. And I didn't know how to track back in those days. It was silly, but I would write the date and the time and no answer. And I called again, no answer. And I called again and no answer. And I called again. And finally I called, and I got somebody else. He said, well, John's not home, I'll be home. But anyway, I started calling back. And so one day I picked up this is like, 3 days later. And I looked at it and I counted up the calls, the no answers. And I talked to the wife one time. And it was like 17, This guy was gone a lot, And I took that card. I said, this is stupid. He's never going to do anything. And I almost threw it away. And I decided, no, I'll make one more call. Picked up the phone, punched in the number, and he answered the phone. And I says, Mr. Desbovic, hi, this is Rick Roller, rookie real estate guy, words to that effect. And I see you have this great duplex out there, and I'd like to help you. I'd like to maybe rent it or sell it or do something with it. He says, kid, look, I don't really want to do anything with the duplex right now. Thanks for calling, though. I appreciate your interest. And he got off the phone. And I wrote copious notes on what he said. Stupid. But anyway, I thought, well, if I had a cool duplex like that, I wouldn't just let it sit vacant. That didn't make sense. So I called him back. Now, not right then. I waited a day. So I called him the next day and says, hi, John, it's Rick Roller again. And, please forgive me, but I've been thinking about that duplex. I'm thinking about it all night. And I if I had something like that, I really want to do something with it. And I'd love to help you, and in whatever fashion. So, oh, well, kid, I really don't want to do anything. Well, can I check back with you later? Yeah, sure. So I did, like 2 days later. I called him back, and, the conversation started getting longer and longer a little bit. And, he started to recognize my voice when I called. I talked to him about 5 times now. And so I called again one time, and he said, hey, yeah, it's you, isn't it? Hey, look, you really want to do something with this, don't you? I said, yeah, I really do, John. He says, well, okay, I'll tell you what. Why don't you come out and list it? I said, so, oh, great, you live at, and I got the address of the assessor. You live at those areas. Oh, no, I don't live there anymore. I live at this new address. And I wrote down the new address. And I drove out to his house, and he lived right across the street from the duplex. Well, come to find out, John had a lot of trouble with this duplex. And like most people, occasionally, when they have trouble with something, they approach things logically and businesslike, or they approach things emotionally. They approach things emotionally, and John was hiding from his own duplex. I mean, he had it up for sale for realtor, and he had it under contract, and the sale fell through, and that bummed him out. Then it was vandalized, and he went and fixed it, and then he put it back on the market with somebody else, and the sewer backed up into it, and then he cleaned it all up and sanitized and replaced the carpet and put in a check valve so it wouldn't happen again. And the other company wasn't successful in getting it sold. And so when that expired, he just let it sit. And every night he'd go to bed, and his sweetheart would remind him, honey, we really ought to do something with the duplex. But he was discouraged, And he'd get up in the morning, and he'd walk out his front door, and there was a duplex. It was still sitting there. So when this little rookie Ricky kept calling, it didn't take a lot for him to say, well, here's someone that's interested. Maybe he can do something. Well, all right, kid, come out and list it. So I went out there, and I went to John's home, and we sat down, and we listed the duplex. And the moment that he signed that listing agreement, something curious happened to John, because it was like the weight of the world started to be lifted from his shoulders, because someone else is going to handle this problem now, and he didn't have to worry about it anymore. And he got euphoric. And he said, hey, kid, you want a beer? And I said, well, John, I don't drink, but even if I did, it was 11 o'clock, a little early. So yeah, you're probably right. And he's a big guy. Just Bobby. And he said, well, look, there's someone I want you to meet. And we were in his home office. He jumped up, and he kind of took me by the arm, and he started pulling me up. And as some assessor, you want to introduce you to somebody, I guess you go with them. But, he was kind of like pulling me out of the office, down the front steps, and down the street. And, I'm going, well, it must have looked kind of funny. But we go about 2 houses down, and he starts pounding on the door. And the door opens, and standing in the door is Donnie Jaswinski. Now, does Bobby and Jaswinski were good buddies, and they hunt and fish a lot together and whatever else. And John looks at Donnie. He says, hey, Donnie, this is Rick Roller, the greatest real estate guy to ever walk the face of the earth. Or words to that effect, because after all, he was euphoric now because I was going to handle his problem, okay? And he says, you need to use Rick in all your real estate deals. So Donnie looks at John, and he looks at me. He looks back at John and says, okay. Hey, Roller, can you come over like a little later this afternoon? We can talk about some things. So I went back, talked to Donnie a little later, and turns out that Donnie was a builder who had just fired his realtor. He listed 3 homes with me that day. And over the course of another few weeks, listed 3 or 4 more. And then over the years, like 20, 30, 40 a year. Wow. That was fantastic. But it doesn't end there. Because when I listed that duplex, it was like on a Wednesday. Now, back in the old days, folks, we used to put things in the classified section of the newspaper. So I wrote a classified ad to come out that weekend. And, on this new duplex listing, I put it in a paper, and, lo and behold, Friday comes along, and I get a call Friday evening. And it was from a guy named Roger Malin. And Roger Malin had just finished doing his taxes, and his accountant told him, Roger, you're making a lot of money, you're paying a lot of taxes, because Roger was married, he didn't have dependents, he didn't have all the write-offs a lot of people do. And his accountant said, you need to go out and buy a bunch of real estate. And Roger said, yeah, sure, I'll do that. And so he's looking through the paper, he sees this duplex, and he calls, and he read a book. And it was William Nickerson's book, How I Took $1,000 and Turned It into $1 Million, real estate in my spare time. So he thought he knew something that, and he did. He was not a foolish man. He was a high-level GS-15 at that time, federal employee, made a lot of money. And he said, well, do you think the owner would carry back some? I said, well, yeah, we talked about that possibility. He may do that. But we need to look at the property first. And he said, well, yeah, sure. Can we look at it maybe tomorrow? I said, sure. Come in the office about 10 o'clock. We'll talk. We'll go out and look at the property. So 10 a.m. I was in the office Saturday morning. Mr. Malin walks in, and
we took his car because it had air conditioning, and we went out and looked at the duplex, and he loved it. He thought it was fantastic. So we went back to the office, little round maple table, sat down, and we wrote up his offer. And it had a small owner carry component to it, and I called Mr. Zbovic, and he wasn't home. I mean, Saturday he wasn't home, Sunday he wasn't home, Sunday evening wasn't home. The guy was gone a lot. So, I mean, Monday morning rolls around and I call and John's home. He says, yeah, sure, great, bring it on out. But before I could get that offer out to John on Monday morning, Sunday night, another broker called and he said, hey, I got an offer on your listing. I says, oh, well, I've got one too. How do we do that? Well, kid, here's how we do it. Take both offers, run them over to the seller, set them down in front of him, and let him choose which one he wants. Okay, I can do that. Do you want to come with me? No, just go ahead and do it. Fine. So I went out to John's place and I had two offers. So when I called John in the morning, I said, John, I don't have one offer, I have two offers. He said, whoa, he's really getting excited. So I go out there, we lay both offers down on the table, and the net sheets had been done, and actually the other offer is about $500 better than mine. And John looks them over carefully and he says, well, which one's best for you? And I said, well, John, that's irrelevant. You should choose the one that's best for you. Clearly, it's this other agent's offer. It's a little bit more money. He says, I don't care about a little bit more money. I want to do the one that's best for you because, after all, I was his buddy now. I took care of his problem, right? So I said, well, John, I mean, you only had to ask twice. Well, that's this one. And he signed it. And that other broker was never a really good friend of mine. But anyway, tough luck. I was ethical in what I did. I always felt great about it because John introduced me to Donnie, remember? And it was great. Now, one day I'm sitting in the office and Donnie Jaswinski, the builder, comes in and he has this other guy coming in with him. He has a tape measure stuck on his belt. Usually when guys are running around tape measures on their belt, they're construction guys, And Donnie says, this is my friend Dan. And Dan's a small builder like I am. I'm wondering if you might have time to help Dan like you helped me. Well, I'm sure I could fit you in. And so Dan became my second builder, and he was giving me 15, 20, 25 homes a year. Really cool houses. And that came from Donnie. Now, so I had Donnie and I had Dan, and then I was making really good money. And so another person get started as a builder as well. And so now I had three builders. But remember, Roger, the buyer who bought the duplex, when John signed his deal, he got euphoric. And he says, well, what else you got? And I said, well, Roger, there's a lot over here I think shows some promise. He says, okay, I'll take that. Now, what else you got? Well, there's a fourplex over here, looks pretty good. We could use your VA and get that. He says, if you moved in. He said, yeah, I could do that. So we got that. And Roger became my most loyal buyer. He'd go out and find these properties. He'd call me and say, hey, Rick, this is Roger. Oh, hey, yeah, how are you, Roger? He said, well, there's another fourplex down the street from the other three who sold me, and I'd like to buy that one too. And it just went up for sale. Could you handle that for me? You think you could find the time? I said, well, sure, Roger. Later, a few years later, Roger actually became an investor of mine, and we started an alternative long-distance telephone company and made a lot of money with that too. But all of that activity made me Rookie of the Year. But I want you all to remember where it came from. It came from one more call. If I had thrown that piece of cardstock in the trash like I was thinking about doing and given up and not made one more call to John Sospovic, what would happen? Now, I'm sharing that story with you because there's going to be a point in your career when you get started where you're really discouraged about pursuing this lead. And it could be one more door knock. It could be one more phone call. It could be one more follow-up with the person. But when you get to that point and you're thinking to yourself, I'm going to chuck it, remember the story and remember one more call and go out and do it, because that is my story, but it's not an unusual story. It will be your story.
And you talk to experienced people in this business, and they will tell you about the one deal that led to 20 others or 30 others, or this vein of gold that they actually mined for years and got them on the right path in real estate. Now, there's a lot of methods that you can use to stimulate those leads and to get going quickly in real estate. I've got another program that's called Jumpstart, and it's been scientifically put together. I mean, I took my experiences, and really what I'm most proud of in my real estate education career is the fact that I have developed not just me as a Rookie of the Year, but 8 others. So I'm going to give you, in that program, time-tested, proven techniques. And that's another thing for another time. Right now, I want to get you through the exam. And I want to give you those one-liner reviews. So, get on, register. We'll find out. I believe in exchange and abundance. You invest a lunch with me, you get far more than your money that you spend. Well, I've really appreciated the opportunity to spend this time with you. And don't be a stranger. Check out our further Google Meetups where we will talk about more and more topics. And I'm going to get you through that exam. You can do this. Thanks for being with us, and thanks for those of you that texted in your questions. Folks, remember, bless lives, make money. This is Rick Roller. See you out there.